What's going on, guys? Back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about how you can build your credit score completely for free. Now, if you want a video where I break down every single thing about what actually goes into a credit score, I'll link that in the description below. But in this video, we're going to be talking specifically about what you can do in order to get over an 800 credit score. Now, credit is extremely important. Your credit score is basically a report card that tells lenders how good you are at borrowing and paying back money. Now, your credit score is going to be extremely important when it comes to things such as taking out a loan for a business, investing in real estate, or taking out a personal loan for something such as a house or a car. On top of that, if you watched my last video breaking down the top credit cards to use, one of my favorite things about credit cards is actually applying in order to get the sign-up bonuses. When you have a higher credit score, this allows you to apply for cards that have a better sign-up bonus for you to take advantage of. With all that being said, let's jump into the 5 different categories and how you can actually maximize these in order to increase your credit score. I'm going to be utilizing the FICO credit score breakdown because that's what's used by over 90% of lenders when you apply for a new loan. The first thing we're going to be looking at is your on-time payment history. Now, your on-time payment history actually equates to about 35% of your overall credit score. Now, your on-time payment history is exactly what it sounds like. It shows lenders whether or not you've ever missed a payment and how good you are at actually paying your bills on time. The reason this category is so important is because this is what lenders ultimately want to know. How good are you at paying off your debt, and are you going to pay that debt on time? Now, if you miss a payment on a loan, this can stay on your credit score for up to 7 years, so it's incredibly important that you never miss a payment. In order to be considered excellent in this category, you need an on-time payment history of over 99%. Now, let's look at exactly how this works if you are to miss a payment. Say, for example, you've had a loan out for 12 months and you missed one of those payments. What the credit lender will do is look at the 11 payments you've made on time, divide that by your 12 total payments, and see that you've paid on time 91.67% of the time. Now, there's a couple ways to make sure that you never drop down to a lower category. Now, number 1 is the obvious one. Make sure you're always paying your bills on time. Number 2, let's say for some reason you did miss a payment. This is why it's so important to have multiple different lines of credit so that you can actually raise that overall average. Looking back at that example from earlier where you missed a payment, let's say instead of having 1 credit card, you actually had 2. So what this means is instead of having 11 out of 12 on-time payments for the last 12 months, you've actually made 23 out of 24 on-time payments because you've been paying every single month on 2 different cards, which is going to raise that overall on-time history to 95.83%. Boom. The thing to remember here is even if you make a minimum payment on time, it's still considered an on-time payment. So by making sure that you're paying bills on time every single month and having multiple different lines of credit is going to be the easiest way to actually elevate this section of your credit score. The second category we're going to look at is your credit utilization, which makes up about 30% of your overall credit score. Your credit utilization is basically how much of your overall line of credit that you're actually utilizing every single month. In order to maximize this category, it's recommended that you're utilizing less than 10% of your overall credit line. What this means is, for example, if you have a credit card with a $2,000 limit on it, you want to make sure that you're utilizing and carrying over less than $200 on that credit card every single month. Now, the important thing to remember about utilization is it's percentage based, not necessarily how much of the dollar amount it is that you're actually carrying over. So again, one of the easiest ways to actually improve this category as far as your credit score goes is to have multiple different lines of credit and make sure that you're not carrying over a balance every single month. Now, looking at a couple different examples here. Earlier, we talked about a credit card with a $2,000 limit and a $200 balance on it being 10% utilization. Say, for example, you applied for another card and got approved for another $2,000 line of credit. Now you're only carrying over $200, but you have a $4,000 line of credit, dropping your utilization down to 5%. Now, the obvious way to increase this category is to make sure that you're never carrying over a balance on a credit card. Now, the other way is actually going to be lowering your utilization by increasing your overall total credit that you have access to. The other important thing to remember about utilization is this comes through the credit cycle, which means if you're just charging normal charges throughout the month, it's not something that's going to fluctuate every single day, but rather it's actually going to change or be affected at the end of the month when your bills due. Now, there's 3 different ways that you can improve this category. Number 1 is to pay down any existing debt that you have. Number 2, you can actually reach out and ask for a credit line increase, which I recommend doing every 6 to 12 months. And number 3, make sure you're continuously applying for new lines of credit. This can not only help you increase your overall credit line, but can also help you lower your overall utilization. This category is going to be the quickest one that you can actually improve. By paying down your total balances, your utilization will actually drop as soon as your new credit card statement comes out. Now, the third category you have very little control over, and that's length of credit, which makes up about 15% of your overall credit score. The only thing I can recommend as far as this category category goes is if you don't have any existing lines of credit, go out and apply for a secured credit card as soon as possible. I actually have a video that I'll link down in the description below that goes over my top 5 credit cards for somebody that's applying for their very first line of credit. Now, the way the credit length is actually calculated is looking at all the different lines of credit that you have and averaging them out. So say, for example, you applied for one credit card 2 years ago. Your length of credit is going to be 2 years. Now, say in another instance, you have a credit card that you applied for 2 years ago and then one that you applied for today. They're going to average those two out together to give you a 1 year length of credit. Now, although at first glance this looks like you shouldn't be applying for new lines of credit, that way you prevent actually shortening that credit length history. What you should actually be doing is building multiple different lines of credit now. That way later on you're not impacted as much if you do apply for a new line of credit. Say, for example, you have one credit line that you've had for 10 years and you apply for a new one. That's immediately going to drop that 10 years down to a 5-year average. Whereas if you have 4 lines of credit that you've had for 10 years and you do apply for a new one, instead of it dropping that 10-year average down to 5, it's going to drop that 10-year average down to 8. Now, in order to maximize this category, it's actually recommended that you have a length of credit over 9 years, which again, right now is completely out of your control. The only thing that I can recommend is make sure that you're applying for multiple different credit lines now. That way it's not affecting you so much later on. On top of this, make sure that your first lines of credit don't have an annual fee, such as a free secured credit card. The reason being is that if you cancel one of these cards later on, it can actually shorten your length of credit. Now, the fourth category that actually goes into determining your credit score is total lines of credit. Now, whereas most people probably think that the fewer lines of credit you have, the better, it's actually the opposite. Having multiple different credit lines shows lenders that you can be a responsible borrower and actually pay back multiple different bills at the same time. This not only shows responsibility with credit, but also can improve your credit score because of things like on-time payment history. On top of that, referring back to the example that we talked about earlier, if you have multiple different lines of credit and you do happen to miss a payment, it's not going to affect your credit score as drastically as it would if you only had 1 or 2 lines of credit. Say, for example, you've had 10 lines of credit for the last 10 years. That means you've had over 1,200 payments. So if you did miss one of those 1,200 payments, you would still be over a 99.9% on-time payment history. The key here is diversifying your different lines of credit as early as possible. That way you're not consistently applying for new credit lines and lowering your overall length of credit. Now, it's actually recommended that you have over 21 different lines of credit, which in my opinion is very difficult for a lot of people. As long as you have a good diverse mix of multiple different lines of credit, it's ultimately going to put you in that top category for your credit score. Ultimately, as long as you have multiple different credit lines and you're utilizing them properly, you're going to maximize this score. And if not, remember, this is only 10% of your overall credit score, so it's not going to have that much of an effect on you. And the fifth category is total inquiries, which equates to about 10% of your overall credit score. An inquiry is basically applied to your credit score when you go out and apply for a new loan or line of credit. In a creditor's eyes, they're wondering why it is that you're actually applying for new loans and what it is that you plan on doing with a new line of credit. Now, there's a difference between a hard inquiry and a soft inquiry. A hard inquiry occurs when you go out and apply for a new line of credit, or you go out and apply for a loan and your credit score is actually ran. Now, the way it works is when you actually get an inquiry on your credit score, that's going to stay on your credit score for 2 years, but it's only going to actually affect your credit score for 1 year. And say, for example, you go out and you're shopping for a new car and you go to 3 or 4 different car dealerships. All of these different credit checks are actually going to be grouped into one, so it's only going to show up as one hard inquiry on your credit score. Now, ultimately, in order to maximize this category, it's recommended that you have 0 hard inquiries on your credit score. But ultimately, you're going to have a couple from applying for a new credit card. Maybe you just purchased a house or a car or took out another type of loan. As long as you're keeping these to a minimum and the loans you're applying for are responsible loans, this ultimately isn't going to have too much of an impact on your credit score because this category only makes up 10% of your overall credit. Now, ultimately, there's 4 things that you can do to make sure that you're improving your credit score. Number 1, make sure you never miss a payment. Number 2, keep utilization below 10%. Number 3, never close an existing credit card. And number 4, make sure you're applying for multiple different lines of credit early on. That way you increase your overall credit diversification and help your total length of credit history. Outside of those 4 things, there's really not a whole lot that you can do in order to increase your credit score. It's more or less just playing the waiting game. That way your credit score builds over time. Now, this is going to help you with multiple different things, from applying for a loan and getting approved for a lower interest rate, to being able to take out a business line of credit and actually make an investment or help expand a business, to even taking advantage of different credit card offers and bonus offers by having a higher credit score. So with that being said, guys, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to drop a like and make sure that you subscribe. If there's anything else that you guys want to hear about, make sure you drop that down in the comments below. Also, connect with me on my other social media accounts. Links for that are in the description.